Hi, I'm Darcy Melton, an oil painter and oil painting instructor, and in this video I'm going to show you how to varnish a painting using retouching varnish. There are a couple of reasons why you might want to varnish your painting. The first is that varnish provides a protective coat on top of your oil painting. The second is that if you've used deep dark colors in your painting, those tend to sink or dull as the curing and drying process happens. So you may notice that those colors have dulled a bit as your painting dries, and varnish will bring those colors back to life. This is the painting that I will be varnishing in the video. It's already been varnished at this point, and you can tell how these darks are really deep and lovely and really kind of singing at this point. For a point of reference, you can look at this piece, which has not been varnished at this point, and while the shadows are not the exact same color as the cabbage painting, you can tell that they have dulled a bit. The contrast isn't as high as when I painted it in the shadow, between the shadows and the highlights, but when I varnish it, they will really come to life. So the painting that I'm going to be varnishing in this video was painted on a gessoed board from PER Belle Arti. You can see the back here. But all of these concepts also apply to using retouching varnish on canvas. It's not just about retouching varnish on board. So there are several different types of varnish. As I've said, I'm going to be using retouching varnish in this video, not just for retouching, but for doing the varnishing the whole piece. Damar varnish is sort of the traditional varnish, and there's also Gamvar varnish, which I particularly like. That one is quite different because you don't have to wait as long for your piece to dry before you apply it. For retouching varnish, I would say you need to wait at least a month before you can apply the varnish. For Damar varnish, I believe it's 6 months at the least you need to wait. So what you need to do is make sure that your painting is dry to the touch before you varnish it. If you don't know how to tell if it's dry to the touch, and you've touched it already and you can't really tell, the safest thing to do is to dab a little bit of linseed oil on a lint-free cloth or even a paper towel if you don't have a lint-free cloth, and test out an area and see if any paint comes up. You can also test out a small amount of varnish in a little area and see if any paint comes up, but once you've applied the varnish, you can't paint over it and reapply paint if any paint has come up. If you do oil out a little spot with linseed oil, you want to make sure that you let that dry and cure all the way so that that part is touch dry as well. Your whole painting needs to be dry to the touch before you apply any of these varnishes. I waited for this painting about 2 months before I varnished it. I probably could have varnished it at the 1 month point, but I didn't have time. But I really would say with retouching varnish, when you're using it across the whole painting, that you need to wait at least a month and do the dry to the touch test. Make sure that it is absolutely dry before you apply any varnish, otherwise you will be pulling paint up and ruining your painting. My final note before I show you how to apply retouching varnish is that no matter what varnish you're using, that you use it in a well-ventilated area. Some of these products are toxic, some of them may just give you a headache, some of them might not affect you at all. I'm using the Schmincke brand of retouching varnish today. It does give me a headache unless I have the doors and windows to my studio open, but Gamvar I've used before and it doesn't affect me at all. However, even with Gamvar, if you have kids or pets in your home, you still want to be careful. So just make sure you're using this in a well-ventilated environment. Okay, let's get to varnishing. So the first thing I'm going to do before I varnish my painting is I'm going to wipe it off with a lint-free cloth. This is just an old glasses cloth that I'm going to use. And to varnish my painting, I'm going to be using this Schmincke Retouching Varnish. I'm using it just like a regular varnish essentially, not as a retouching varnish. And I'm going to be using this old jar that is thoroughly cleaned and dried just so that I can get my brush dipped in. I'm going to put my varnish in that. So I have my board on a clean and non-dusty surface. I'm just going to wipe it down, get all the little hairs off that I can. I'm just doing this dry. I'm not putting any water on it. You can if you need to, But this one isn't so dusty that I really need to wipe it off with water too much. I've now poured just a little bit of varnish into my glass. I'm going to go ahead and varnish. So you want to dip in and get as much excess off. As much excess off as possible. Don't want a lot on your brush. And to begin, I'm going to just do back and forth strokes. I, particularly on a board, I like to scrub it in. I do this because the first varnish that I ever used was Damar varnish, which is fairly different from traditional Damar varnishes, I think. And their directions were to scrub in. And particularly on a board, I like to do that. And it gets it nice and thin. You wouldn't want to do this with a Damar varnish, but it's what I like to do with retouching varnish on board and with if I'm ever using Damar. Careful not to splatter. You do want to go as quickly as possible without being sloppy, because it does dry quite quickly and it gets sticky. As even as possible. Okay, I'm just going to lift it up to check that it's fairly even. A couple of spots that I missed. I like to do this in good, daytime lighting, just because it's easier to see the reflection on the varnish and where the matte spots are, so I can make sure that I get it evenly and cover all the spots. Okay, I feel like that is fairly even. I am going to leave this to dry for at least 24 hours. And then I'll see if I think I need a second coat. A little more. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please follow and like. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment, and I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability. I hope this helped you learn how to use retouching varnish to varnish an oil painting.